Chapter 3. What do you know about the church at Corinth? I ask that question almost every week, if not every week, but what do you know about the church at Corinth? If you didn't know anything before, hopefully you've learned a couple things since we've started. It was a very sinful and wicked town, and a lot of that practice has moved over into the church. So it's a church with a lot of problems. And as typical society today, we like to label problems, we like to label sin and give it a little more easy to swallow name, right? The issues that Paul deals with in this church are sin. And we need to be just as emphatic. In fact, we're going to see as we move through this book that Paul pulls no punches. He calls sin what it is, and sin needs to be addressed. And the sin that is infecting this church is leading to its destruction. Just like today, if sin enters the church, what happens? Well, there's divisions for sure, but it leads to its ultimate destruction. So sin has to be dealt with. And the first issue that we're dealing with, as Paul is dealing with, is, as Jody said, it's divisions and contentions in the church. This church, not unlike churches today, not unlike people today, this church has chosen individual men that they're going to follow. So Paul not only addresses the problem, but he corrects the problem. He tells them emphatically what you should do. So we've emphasized this every week. Again, I'll emphasize it. Excuse me. These are not hard questions. What is the foundation of the church? Who is the foundation of the church?
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. Always. When a church changes that foundation or loses the focus of that foundation, trouble ultimately is coming. It's unavoidable. In chapter 1, Paul emphasizes that. Chapter 2, chapter 3, we'll look at it today again. But he also emphasizes in chapter 1 the priority of what? If Jesus Christ is the foundation, what should the church be doing? What's one of, not the only, but what is one of the functions of the church? Okay, I'll make it even. What did you come to church to do today?
Worship.
What's part of worship? Preaching, singing, it's all worship. But Paul emphasizes in chapter 1, as we're correct, the preaching of the Word. The preaching of the Word. Oftentimes in our thinking about worship, we neglect or forget to understand that preaching is part of worship. A main part of worship. To hear the Word preached. And Paul, and I'm not saying we have this problem, but Paul says, I preach the Word. I preach the cross of Jesus Christ. I don't preach any other gospel. That's alone what I preach. And a church today still has the same command. We're to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. When a church neglects to do that, even, we'll look at it today, there are a lot of worthwhile causes, but when we neglect to teach and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, there are problems that are going to arise. So that is our focus. Preach the gospel. In chapter 3, Paul rebukes them sharply, and he calls them babies. Now, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. I'm not going to go back, but I just want to say this. Who here likes to be called a baby? None of us. And Paul does that intentionally to get their attention. You're acting like a bunch of babies. And usually we throw in the next words. It says, it's time to grow up. Grow up. And he uses a word that we don't often use, especially today, but he calls them a carnal Christian, and that's kind of an oxymoron. You remember what an oxymoron is? What'd you give us last week, Jody? Jumbo shrimp. It's two words that really don't go together. Carnal meaning fleshly as opposed to spiritual. How should a Christian live? In the Spirit. But Paul says, you're living in the flesh. You're not acting like a Christian. You're acting like an unsaved person. By your actions of choosing these men, specifically in context, we're going to stay in context today. Hopefully I always stay in context, but the focus, the foundation is Jesus Christ. So go to chapter 3, and we made it to verse 10. Paul gives some very simple but profound analogies. He says, who's Paul? Who's Apollos? We're nobody but ministers. The word minister simply means servants. We're servants here to do God's work. The profoundness of this whole passage is God has chosen us to accomplish His work. If you think about that for a minute, you'll see how profound that is. But He's chosen us. Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered. Which job is more important? They're equally important. If one doesn't get done, the other one is of no value. Equally important. He says that. Verse 8, now he that planteth and he that watereth are one. We're working together to accomplish the same goal. Church is not competition. I'm not in competition with Pastor John. He's not my competition either. We're on the same team, working to accomplish the same goal. That's right. That's what we're here for. God has, and we're going to see, go to verse 10. According to the grace of God which is given to me. And let's stop there. That's a profound statement. Who equips us to do the work? God does. God does. Don't ever forget that. And I want to just, and I'm not here to step on any toes, but it's easy sometimes to get pretty puffed up. But God equips us for this job. It's not about me. It's not, Paul says that in the beginning of chapter 2. I came to you not with excellency of speech or wisdom. It's not about me. When a preacher, teacher, whoever, when the guy up front is, and it can happen so subtly. But our focus is always about Jesus. God has equipped you for this job. The grace of God. As a wise master builder. So I want to look at the word wise. Just keep your brain going. Of the books of the Bible, when we think of wise or wisdom, what book comes to your mind? Proverbs. And we studied Proverbs not too many weeks, months, not weeks, months, maybe even years ago. I guess I had Hebrews in between there, didn't I? Proverbs. What's wisdom? The application of knowledge. So we have in Proverbs and throughout Scripture, we have knowledge and wisdom. Which precedes? Which comes first? Knowledge, the information. Now, what do you do with that information?
Get wise.
Get wise. You put it to use. If you have a head full of facts, a head full of information, and do not, you refuse to act upon it, it's of no value. So Paul says, God's called me to be this wise master builder. I'm using what God has given to me, equipped me to do in the best way that I can. I think underlying, at least I can read it, I don't know if you can read between the lines. I think we see that's a very humble statement from Paul. If you read the New Testament, the books that Paul writes, you will find that he is very humble. Paul calls himself the least of the apostles. Why?
Persecuted.
What's that?
He was out of his time.
He was out of his time, Kim?
Persecuted.
He persecuted the church of God. And yet God called him. But that was always in his mind. I'm not worthy to be used of God in this way. I can say that too. Pastor John has said that on multiple occasions. But God's called him to do this as a wise master builder. I'm going to use these gifts, these talents, these abilities that God's given me to the best of my ability. What's a master builder? When you read the word, it's a compound word. Go back to your little grammar lessons. What's a compound word? It's two words combined. So that tells you right off the bat, we have a couple different definitions. Right? What do you suppose it means? Master builder. You might have a different translation. Do they use a different word? Anybody?
One in charge of the construction.
Okay, and what do we call that today?
General contractor.
A general contractor. Okay? Even before you have a general contractor, though, what do you have? An architect. Someone who has to draw the plans. Is that important? Martin, is that important? Yeah. Do you have guys that want to change the plans? All the time. But in this context, Paul's saying, I'm that wise master builder. God's given me the plans. I have them before me. I'm going to stick to them. These are the plans. And he's going to give some details here in just a verse or two. But these are the plans. What's a general contractor's job? Follow the blueprint. But even
He oversees everything.
he's the coordinator. He's the starter. He's the one that gets everybody together. Make sure the supplies are there. Make sure everything moves smoothly. Paul says, I planned it. He started this project. He's the starter. He's the contract. He's getting it going. Where does a contractor start? After you got the plans and you're beginning construction, where do you start? Look at that's what he says. As a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation. What's a foundation? And I know this is all redundant. Y'all think I know all about this, and this is one of those illustrations that Paul uses that really needs no explanation. So I'm going to explain it anyway. What's a foundation? It holds everything together. And when I was thinking of this, that little picture you had last week on the screen, and you gave the illustration of working with a block layer, a brick layer, right? Is it important how the foundation is constructed? Absolutely. Absolutely. Years and years ago, I got to visit New York City, and we were walking through Manhattan, and they were building skyscrapers. And the fences were tall, but we got to one of the fences, and we could look in, and the excavators were probably 100 feet underground, digging the hole. I thought, this is massive. But then when you look up, you understand why they're so deep. They have to get that foundation down to solid ground, solid rock, so it is firm. Last week when we closed, we sang that little song, you remember? I'll read it to you. From the Gospel of Luke. Jesus says, and ye call me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say. Whosoever cometh to me, and heareth my sayings, and doeth them, I will show you to whom he is like. He is like a man which built an house and digged deep and laid the foundation upon a rock. And when the floods arose and the stream beat vehemently upon that house, it could not shake it, for it was founded upon a rock. That's hearing and obeying. Now listen, he that heareth and doeth not. It's not that he doesn't understand. Get that clearly. It's that he's ignoring it or rejecting it. He that hears and doeth it not is like a man without a foundation, who built a house upon the earth. The book of Matthew calls it sand, against which the stream did beat vehemently, and immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. With the wrong foundation, the house will not stand. Paul says, I'm that wise master builder. I have the plan. I have the ability. I've laid this foundation. And, go to verse 10 again, and another man buildeth thereon. So you know the picture. We've all been involved in some kind of building project. We know the picture. We know the process. Last sentence of verse 10 is the warning. But let every man take heed how he buildeth thereupon. The foundation is laid. It's laid correctly. It's laid according to the plan. There's no variation. There's no changes. It's laid according to plan. And now it's time to build. So, got that picture. Verse 11 is key to the whole passage. Just in case you didn't know, here it is. For other foundation can no man lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. The application here, in context, is for a church. That's the context. He's talking about building a church. Individuals that God has chosen, God uses to build a church. And he's not, even though the illustration is building, construction, he is not referring to a physical building. He's referring to building in the lives of people. Okay? That's our strict context, but there's great personal application. I'm going to make both. God uses men, people, to build a church. We often call the Apostle Paul a church planter, right? He starts the seed. He starts this whole process. And Paul, throughout the books, you read the book of Acts, Paul went to a city, he got a gathering together, he started a church of local believers, and then what did he do? He went to another town, but he left that church in capable hands. Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered. This is the process of building a church. But it has to have the right foundation. Back to our illustration, you've all seen building projects, right? Dig a hole, set the forms, pour the cement, get that done, and then the trucks come in and they drop off the lumber, the building materials. I'll just give you a couple illustrations. I went to Israel a few years ago, 2018. And then we went from Galilee in the north to the Dead Sea in the south. We went just about everywhere you could go. What do you suppose the main building material is in Israel? Stones. I only saw one building, and I got to where I was looking because I thought I only saw one building that was built of wood. Everything was built of stone. Why is that? It's what they have available. I'll use the illustration. Paul and I were shooting prairie dogs, and he'll probably remember this. North of Crawford, Toadstool Park. Remember? Toadstool Park. Unique name. What's a toadstool? A mushroom. So this is badland country, if you know what badlands are. It has unique geological formations. In part of this park, they have a sod house. What's a sod house?
Dirt.
Made out of dirt. Why?
That's what they had.
Because they didn't have any stones or trees in that country. And it's open to the public, we walk through this sod house. It has a lot of interest to me because my great-great-grandparents lived in sod houses as they pioneered and homesteaded in Nebraska. And they weren't, I mean, we walked through that, remember that? Well, this is kind of cool, but I don't want to live here. I remember my grandma telling, when it rained, the roof leaked. What was on the floor? Dirt. You were always dirty, but it's what they had. So that's the building material. That was just a free history lesson. But here's back to Corinthians. Paul says, here's the building materials. I can use my little brain and imagination and see the trucks backing up and unloading the materials. He goes. Verse 12. Now if any man build upon this foundation, and here's your list: gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and stubble. Now if you're a cynic, you're going to say, well, there's certainly lots more options for building materials. Well, this is what's available. You're not looking at any other, this is what's available. That's your choice. Now if any man, whose responsibility is it to build? Everybody's and each one, together and individual. We're building. You've all seen different types of buildings, right? Some are built and last for generations. Some fall down in the first snowstorm. I was just reading this yesterday. Juneau, Alaska's had 5 feet of snow in 11 days. So what's happening to their roofs? They're collapsing. Eight boats have sank in the harbor. Isn't that amazing? Because they're loaded with snow. And most of those boats are people that don't live in Juneau year-round, so they're down south not thinking about it, and they have a picture of your boat sunk in the harbor because it's full of 5 feet of snow. I remember first year I was in Cordova, Alaska, we had about 20 inches of snow in May, and we were down. It was before all the fishermen showed up. My brother being the good neighbor and I being the good hired hand, we're down in the harbor with our shovels shoveling boats off. But that was free too. By the way, in our context here, these are your building materials. When you read that list first off, what instantly comes to mind? Some of these building materials are going to last, and some aren't. That's obvious. But there's a personal responsibility. Who's going to get the job done? Who's going to build? We gave the statistic last week, I think it was, and I give this to you to be a little bit motivational, a little bit rebuking. 90% of the work in the typical American church is done by 10% of the people. So what are the rest of you doing? Okay? Who's going to build? And that's the implied question. If any man build, is it an automatic that it's going to get done? No. Whose choice is it? It's your choice. You can look at that foundation and say, boy, that looks good. You can look at that pile of building materials and say, that's what I need. But if you don't get out there and get going, it's not going to get done. That's profound, right? It's so simple, I don't even need to explain it. But that's what happens. If any man build upon this foundation, gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and stubble. What's precious stones? What do you think of when you read that? Anybody have a different translation?
Jewels.
Jewels? Do you use jewels in construction? So what do you think it really means in context?
Stone.
Stones. When we were in Jerusalem, a lot of personal illustrations. We were in Jerusalem, we were at the Temple Mount. And they have excavated down probably 100 feet down. And those old stones, limestone stones, weighing up to 20 tons, are still there. Still, in the pyramids in Egypt, the same way. I haven't been there, but fitted so tight together, you cannot take a piece of paper and slip it in a crack. Still standing. So it's not necessarily jewels, it's these stones. Marble. One of the commentators I read, marble stones, and they gave the illustration. I think it is pretty nice. You go to the ancient ruins in like Rome or Greece. What's still standing? The marble columns, the marble stones are still standing after centuries, and oftentimes fire put to it. We're going to come to fire. These building materials endure. They last. What happens when you put fire to wood, hay, and straw?
Ash.
Very quickly, too. You have a pile of ashes. Okay? Verse 13. Every man's work shall be made manifest. Word is used often in the King James Bible. What does it mean? Manifest. We don't use it often. Define it. What? To show clearly. To see clearly. There's another word coming up. The day shall declare it. It means, these two words together give you a vivid picture. It means to take the cover off. In construction, it means to pull the sheetrock off and see what's underneath it. Sheetrock can hide a multitude of sins as a contractor, right? Mm-hmm. It looks good. And you wonder, I wonder what's back there. And this is what he's saying. You can put up, and we all fall into this trap. You can put up a good outside. Right? Looks good. It's painted nice, it's finished nice, everything's in place. Facade, a fake wall, a fake front. But what's behind it? And that's what he's saying. Every man's work shall be made clear. Look through the wall. For the day shall declare it. Open it up. I don't know about you. And we'll get to it as we study through Corinthians. There's a day of judgment coming. Okay? Bible's clear. Revelation chapter 21, 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Those are judgments. What happens at a judgment? I'll ask you. You ever had to stand before a judge? My hand is up. I've been there. I'll tell you, it is the most terrifying experience I ever endured. Because I knew he made it clear, your future is in my hand. Right here. I hold you just like this. And I can tell you, I was very respectful. I was very humble. Because I knew a wrong answer I would pay for. And he had all the facts, all the details. Unfortunately, it turned out well for me. But when you stand before God as a judge, everything is bared. least to me. God's not only going to judge what we do, He's going to judge why we did it, how we did it. Have you ever had a bad attitude? The little story, the little joke is told about you know what cabin fever is? We get that about,
Now.
well, not now. It's too early to get it now. If you get it now, you're in trouble. Like March, April. Like, we hope this ends. The little boy in school with cabin fever is standing looking out the window, wanting to be outside. I can relate to that guy. And the teacher's exasperated. She finally says, who should I pick on? Sit down. Get back to your studies. And after a couple admonitions, the little guy says, Teacher, I may be sitting on the outside, but I'm standing up on the inside. So what's obedience? We sing a little song that says, obedience is the very best way to show that you believe. Doing exactly what the Lord commands. What's the next phrase? With a good attitude. Can you be obedient with a bad attitude? You can be conforming, but see what the point? God's looking at both. God's tearing down the walls. He's looking at you on the inside. To stand before God, to stand before Jesus, I don't know about you, but it terrifies me. Because He's going to see me who I really am. And nobody, not my wife, not my kids, nobody really knows who I am. Nobody really knows who you are. But God's going to strip all that away and get that full look at you and expose you for who you are. What's a hypocrite? Someone who plays an act. Now we're going to get real personal. Who's a hypocrite? I've got to raise my hand. And I don't raise the hand proudly, I raise it shamefully. God knows that.
So public place and private place.
Public and private. And will all be exposed. Every man's work shall be made manifest, for that day that judgment shall be revealed, because it shall be revealed or tested by fire. And the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. So I learned something about this verse. I'll just throw it out there. This is the one verse where the Catholics get purgatory from. Did you know that? I thought, wow. I wonder where they came up with that. But this purgatory is that, in between, where they refine you. It's not taught here at all. This is not what it's teaching. It's teaching that God is going to have a means whereby He's going to judge us. And in the illustration, He uses fire. What does fire do to these building materials? Gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and stubble. What does it do?
Or it burns it down.
It either makes it better and it lasts, or becomes ash. Even gold, silver, and precious stone is affected by fire. Gold and silver are purified by fire. I've never purified gold and silver, but as a kid growing up, we used to cast a lot of lead bullets. My dad always let us help, but was always watching over us carefully. And as we melted that pot of lead, we would put beeswax in the lead. And the beeswax would react with that molten lead, and all the impurities would come to the top. And we used an old spoon that we got out of the kitchen. I don't think my mom... Hopefully we asked her which one we could use and destroy. And we would take that old spoon and skim off all those impurities and throw them away. The slag. We wanted that pure lead to cast those bullets. But fire does affect those things. Don't imagine that you can go through this life, this process, unscathed by fire, because it's going to have an effect on you. The fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. Every man, individual, alone. Verse 14, if any man's work abide, which means survives the fire, which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. And we talked about the reward back in verse 8. What's a reward? Getting what?
Something you get after you accomplish it.
It's something you get after you've accomplished a goal. Usually a reward is associated with something good, right? Okay, it's an acknowledgement. If your life, how you built your life upon the foundation, survives the fire, survives the test. When John did this lesson a couple weeks ago, he talked about crowns. We get those rewards. See if you paid attention to John. What do we do with those crowns or rewards? Yeah, we don't even keep them. Which tells me the priority is always about who?
Jesus.
About Jesus. Okay? But you'll get a reward. Matthew chapter 25 is the illustration, parable Jesus gives about the rich man, and I use this often. The rich man who goes to a far country, before he goes, it's going to be a long trip, he gathers his servants together and he says, to each one's individual ability, he gives them responsibilities. That's my paraphrase. He gives to the first guy what? 5. The next guy, and the last guy, 1. Individual ability. They all don't have the ability to have 5 or 2. And here's a valuable lesson. You don't look at envy at the guy that's got more. Which is your focus? What am I doing with what God's given me? Before he gives those talents, it says, out to those guys, and then he says, when I come back, there's going to be a day of reckoning. King James uses that very word, reckoning, a day of accounting, where you're going to give an account of what you did with what I gave to you. That's what it means. There's a day coming. Do we know when that day is? No. So I'm blathering here, but how would you describe basic human attitude and mentality? If you've been given this charge, but you know it's in the future, I got a lot of time, right? I can do it tomorrow, right? Tomorrow.
Don't put it down, put it away.
But that's our mentality. And when that master, that king, or when this judgment comes, it's going to take a lot of people by surprise. I thought I had more time. Well, don't expect that. Verse 15. Very, very sobering verse. A verse, I think, is going to catch a lot of people. If any man's work shall be burned, and it literally means consumed. It's burned up. There's nothing but ashes left. If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss, which is a complete opposite of reward. You get nothing. Or maybe we should put it, you get exactly what you deserve. You can't point a finger anywhere at anybody for an excuse. It stops with you. You suffer loss. But he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire. This is a huge rebuke to these first century Corinthians. He just called them babies. Are they in danger of losing their salvation? What's the verse say? No. No, you're not going to lose your salvation. And we, just like them, and I'll clarify this. I'm very thankful for eternal security found in Jesus Christ. I can't lose my salvation. That gives me great comfort. And as a kid growing up, I struggled with that. Especially when you do something sinful, right? I remember even going forward in a church service, terrified that I was losing, I'd lost my salvation. And the guy that counseled me took me to 1 John chapter 5, verse 12. And he said, I'm not even going to read it, you're going to read it. And you know what the key word to that verse is? I'll read it for you. And if you can't figure it out, you need help. Not being insulting, it's that simple. Here it is. It's verse 13. These things have I written unto you that believe on the name of the Son of God. Is that you? That's what the counselor told. Is that you? Have you done that? I said, absolutely. So now read. That ye may... Anybody have to take an idea? No. K-N-O-W. That's emphatic. That's a strong word. That you may know that you have eternal life, and that ye may believe in the name of the Son of God. I don't lose my salvation. You don't lose your salvation. But you are able, capable, just as I am, to live a life that's wasted. Totally, completely wasted. We talked about this Wednesday night. How do you define success? Well, even back, how does the world define success? Money. He's with the most toys wins. I've used this illustration before. Jana, for her first years out of high school, worked with her Uncle Mark for a very wealthy man, a billionaire. Flies around the world in a G5 Gulfstream, a $50 million airplane. Has his pilots on call 24 hours a day. I want to go here, and they go there, right? Beck and call. Mark has been out to dinner with this individual. They don't work for him anymore. And Mark would say, we go out to dinner, and he goes like this. Instant attention. Gets whatever he wants, usually followed with a $100 bill. Is he successful? Very successful in the eyes of the world. Enviable successful. And I'll tell you, I met him a couple times. My opinion, the most vile and unhappy person I have ever met. I told my brother-in-law Mark, how can you work with this guy? I would probably shoot him. And then Martin and I, Martin's good friend, Vic Wise. Remember we logged for him up there? He invited us into his shack. Apt description. And we had fried bologna sandwiches. he was the most when he prayed and asked a blessing on those, I thought we were eating steak when we got done. And he had nothing. What's the definition of success? Where's Vic Wise today? If you could define Vic Wise, how would you define him, Martin?
I'd say I'm good.
Faithful, contented, successful in the eyes of God. It's not what we have, it's what we build with our lives. In the context, it's these individuals who are building a church. Who builds the church? We're a part of the process. If we faithfully use what God's given to us to accomplish what He wants done, it's God's church. And I'm out of time, but I think the passage really teaches church leaders, but it has great personal application. Church leaders, stay true to your calling, preach the word. Don't get sidetracked by anything else. Stay true to your calling, preach the word. And don't confuse this. These aren't my thoughts either. I have very few original thoughts. Don't confuse busyness with the real work. Stay faithful. Stay faithful. Are we all called to a job? Yes. I'll summarize. How you do your job is entirely up to you. Paul says, it's Jesus' church. He built it. It's His foundation. But I'm doing my part. Are you? And it's 10 till, so I'm going to quit. Very familiar passage, very easy to apply. Oftentimes we want to either pat ourselves on the back or ignore it. But we're going to give an account on how we live, how we work, how we live for Jesus. So let's pray. Father, we're thankful for this word. I know it's very familiar. People have heard these